Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conscious Conversion. This is a weekly podcast about how we bridge the gap between business and spirit, money and meaning, technology and regeneration in a wildly changing world. In a time of so much polarity and uncertainty, this podcast is exploring how together we are connecting across the planet, across our differences, and across dimensions as we're building the new earth together. As always, I am yours, Sarah Yamtich, here with my dear, longtime, beautiful friend, Chanti Zak. We have been friends for several years, basically since I've been in business. And when I was just reading that description of the podcast that I've been reading at the beginning of every episode, I felt this deep sort of like knowing that you belong on this podcast, you belong in this conversation so much right now. Shanti's in Canada, and as we speak, there's a lot of shitstorm going on in her country, and we are literally connecting across the world, across dimensions right now. Thank God for the internet and podcast technology so that we can have this conversation and hear from you and all of your brilliance. Thank you for being here, Chanti. And I'm going to introduce who you are other than just my super best friend. Chanti is a copywriter. I always call her the copywriter to the stars because of the likes of who she's worked with, which I'll let her talk about if she wants. But amazing online entrepreneurs that many of you, if not all of you, have heard of. And she's also the quiz funnel queen. If you've ever been to my website at consciousconversion.com, I've got a quiz. What kind of paradigm shifter are you? And you take that quiz, and that was created by Chanti herself, and the results and the emails, she wrote the copy for that in my voice so freaking beautifully. Chanti is a genius when it comes to capturing the essence of someone's voice in their business in the written form. And I'll stop blabbering now. Hi, Chanti.
Aw, thank you for that sweet introduction. You give the best introductions, I gotta say. Every time you introduce me to someone over email, it makes my heart just explode with joy and my ego as well. You know how to stroke it.
I'm here to stroke your ego and warm your heart.
Give me your new tagline. Aw, thank you. I'm so excited to finally be on your pod. It is definitely my jam, the subject matter.
I know. I think we're going to have so many different directions we could go. That's probably my fatal flaw as an interviewer is I'm like, I want to talk about everything.
Yeah.
So in order to address infinity, I'm going to have to jump around a lot.
Right. That is part of the reason I have a new podcast that I co-host with one of my besties, Dawn, and we're doing 90-minute episodes. Sometimes they extend to 2 hours, which is long for a podcast on online business marketing stuff, but we go so beyond that realm and so deep. And yeah, because I have the same fatal flaw. Just want to explore all the things, right?
Totally. So I always like to drop this bombshell question to start it, just to get the depth open, to open the depths. And that is like, who are you in this incarnation and what is your soul's purpose right now?
Oh, whoa. Wow. In this incarnation, I just read Many Lives, Many Masters. Have you ever read that?
No.
Such a beautiful book, and it's about reincarnation. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and past lives, and like, what did I do to get to this place? I don't know. But in this present life, I am a mother of three little beautiful beings. I am a steward of a quite magical piece of land here in BC, Canada, in the mountains, surrounded by the world's largest inland temperate rainforest and lakes and rivers and hot springs. And I am married to my twin flame. Shout out to him. And I run a online business where I get to help world changers, people doing really important work and changing broken systems in every sort of realm. And yeah, I get to show up and support them. And for whatever reason, I've been gifted with the ability to put big ideas into words. So often I'm helping people with that, really just helping them to share their brilliance and communicate it in a way that the people who need them most will align with and fully grasp.
Thank you for doing that. I mean, that's basically the definition of marketing right there for me. Like, talk about like new paradigm business, new paradigm marketing. It's not about the the manipulation of people to convince them of what they want or need. It is, well, what is it? Let's define it. Like, marketing is like, it's creating an empathic message, right? It's something that reaches into the hearts and souls of your audience and shows them who you are, so that they can really feel you and know if that's what they want or not.
Yeah, I don't think marketing works without emotion, without and that emotion being a two-way street. So you, as the marketer, as the person trying to reach others, you gotta be in tune with the emotions that those others are feeling and really know exactly where they're at and meet them there. And then on the flip side, that other person needs to be in a state of receptivity and openness and hope, really, that whatever it is you're communicating to them is maybe the thing that can help them do whatever.
Yeah. And the other thing you spoke to in your introduction of yourself is that you work with people who are fixing broken systems and people who are shifting the paradigm, who are rebuilding the new world that, to replace the one that's clearly crumbling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to help, a lot of folks who have a hard time putting their genius into words and communicating what it is they really do. Because I don't know. I don't know if it's just the nature of existing with a lot of integrity and being humble and knowing that there's no way that you could have all the answers, and that's sometimes blocking people from expressing the answers that they do have. I don't know what forces are at play entirely, but I work with a lot of, healers, coaches, really soul-centered people who are like, how do I talk to people about what I actually help them with? And yeah, yeah, it's fun times because to me it's always so obvious.
Yeah, you've always been a big help for me with that because I can see somebody else's genius and like talk about that. Like that's what my job here is to stroke your ego and warm your heart. Like I can totally do that all day long with good people. But then when it comes to, putting myself out there, it's like, you got like this, like, it's like an existential crisis every time. Like I almost
Absolutely.
have to have like I have someone on my team to help me through my social media existential crises every time I post. Like,
Yeah.
is it okay?
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
What's that?
Oh man, I'm glad I'm not the only one. It never goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, I mean, and if you really want to be super authentic, and that's the only way to show up in the world, as far as I'm concerned, then it's a lot to pour your heart out in front of all the people.
Yeah, and if you want to change the system, which is a big concept, and of course there are many systems within the system, the dominant patriarchal hierarchical can't talk system, then that's like extra terrifying because you're coming up against forces that have a whole lot more resources than any of us small potatoes.
At least any of us individually. I mean,
Individually, yeah.
yeah.
Collectively, different story.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a big part of what's going on right now, too, is like collective. I don't want to say versus because I do not want to create a more battle where there doesn't need to be battle. But it's definitely something. There's something going on between sort of the seemingly dominant powers and the rest of us.
Yeah, yeah. Have you been following this Joe Rogan stuff?
I have peripherally. I mean, yeah, and a little bit, not in detail.
Yeah, I find it so hilarious, this effort to cancel Joe Rogan. I mean, I think in part it's because the the dominant media systems are terrified of him and what he represents. He has, I think, 11 times more listeners on a weekly basis than CNN.
How is that even possible? How many people is that? Like,
It's like many, many millions, like hundreds of millions of downloads a week. And he's just a guy. He's just
yeah,
a regular guy who is curious about a number of different things and talks to people about stuff
yeah. I mean, he's
in
pretty
a
smart.
relatively unfiltered way.
Yeah, he's pretty smart. I wouldn't call him like the genius of our times or anything like that.
No.
He's a pretty smart guy. He's pretty cool. Like he's pretty interesting. Um, but just, I mean, what is his secret sauce that has him so popular? I mean, I enjoy his podcast too. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's obviously he's not like quote unquote average,
yeah,
but he's pretty relatable and like
yeah,
just seeming like your bro who you'd call up and have an easygoing conversation with. And I think he asks questions that a lot of us are thinking, but we don't dare ask them
yeah.
because I mean he touches on topics that are taboo for sure, and he does it in a way that's, I mean, I think it's graceful for the most part. Many people would disagree with that, but when you manipulate clips and just take things out of context and give that to people as a representation of who someone is, that's not exactly fair. which is the psychological tactic that was used in this recent attempt to totally cancel him, but it backfired. And I think people are waking up to the toxicity of that kind of cancel culture and how just how opposite of progress
Yeah.
that is.
Well, in a recent interview, I was talking to Kevin Oros about polarity and toxic polarity versus positive polarity. And I've been saying since, from the beginning of my agency that I love positive polarity. Like, bring me clients that are positively polarizing, like yourself. Like, you're talking often about your farm and sovereignty and how important it is to be sovereign. And that's unfortunately, relatively polarizing message these days because of the implications in the world we live in right now. But positive polarization is good. I mean, you might like trigger some people, but a lot of people are going to take a double take, and new synapses are going to fire in their brain, and they're going to get sort of excited about something. And I find Joe Rogan to be mostly positively polarizing, and I find cancel culture to be absolutely toxically polarizing. When it becomes a me versus them, or left versus right, or good versus bad, and dark versus light, and all this stuff, that's toxic polarity, in my opinion. But when it's the magnetism of like the positive and negative poles, or when it's the magnetism of masculine and feminine, all of this, like these kinds of things, this is like positive polarity. And there's something I think about the way that Joe Rogan, if you actually listen to his interviews from the, and not just like the little clips that people pull out, he's very like polarizing in a very respectful way.
Yeah. I wonder if part of the ability to be positively polarizing is to acknowledge that within ourselves we have shadow, a lot of shadow, and equally a lot of light, and that we have our worldview because we have our unique experiences. If we didn't have our unique experiences, we wouldn't have the worldview that we have. So, like, not holding it with this death grip that it's the only way or the best way to perceive things, but with the gentleness that, I mean, you really only perceive things this way because of things that were, for the most part, outside of your control, circumstance, privilege, experience, and you'll continue growing and having experiences and changing your views. Like the other day, I started writing something about all the things I used to hate because I was reflecting on the political climate here in Canada. It's very strange. It's very strange to me that there's this movement where people, like, all they want is to not live in a police state where the government can, on a whim and not even based in science, just decide to like close all the businesses, freeze your bank account. They don't like what you're saying. Like detain you without reason right now because they've enacted this emergency act. And so this movement for less kind of government overreach has been equated with like the alt-right, which is just like a really weird label to begin with, and the definition of which feels like whatever suits the purpose du jour is what the definition of that will be. But like, to be labeled as that is so strange. And I was thinking back to when I was 18 and my dad, he he signed me up as a conservative party member, voter. I don't know. I got a card in the mail that was like, thank you for registering under the Canadian Conservative Party. And I was so mad. I like lost my shit on him. And I called them and I was like, get me off this bleeping list. Like, I have no interest in these politics whatsoever. And I would say to this day, I mean, I don't align with what like the typical conservative viewpoints are. Like, I don't want to rape the earth. I want to heal it. and all these other things, but how weird. And that was like toxic polarity is my reaction to that, when like really it doesn't even matter. It's just a thing my dad did, probably as a joke for the most part. Anyhow, I was writing this thing, all the things I used to hate. And I used to hate capitalism. I used to think capitalism was like a scourge of the earth, and that we just all need to be equal. And I mean, in a lot of ways we do. It's just more complex than hating something outright and not allowing any room for conversation around it. And of course, now my viewpoints around capitalism are much more nuanced. Like what does conscious capitalism look like? Can capitalism be a force for good? We know that it can. We know that it's important and it aligns with human nature to strive and create and excel at something and share your gifts and be rewarded for that. And there's all these positives. But me at whatever age, I thought capitalism was evil. There was no room for that conversation. It was this weird black and white stance that I think on the deepest level is rooted in just fear and anger, and that like outrage that comes from holding so tight a grasp on what you believe to be true.
Because if you really believe that something is true, you don't need to grasp at it so hard, so tightly.
Right. And you can entertain other possibilities, and you can have conversations without feeling like that conversation is a threat to your very existence and the existence of the people that you love. And that's the kind of outrage that people are coming at Joe Rogan with. And it's like, really? You're so terrified of this man for talking about things and asking uncomfortable questions that your darling legacy media outlets refuse to ask, hence the reason that they are dying. Yeah.
What would, like, okay, so, you know, on this podcast, we're thinking, leaning into conceptualizing, conceiving, birthing, you know, a new way of doing things, a new way of doing relationships, economies, dwellings, and how we live and how we commune with nature, all of this. And right now, this conversation so far has largely been about sort of like media and marketing. What does, in your view, new paradigm media look like? New paradigm marketing look like?
Oh my gosh. Well, imagine instead of scrolling through the daily news and just seeing headlines all about the latest apocalyptic shit, how like climate change is going to kill us all unless we allow our government overlords to take the reins and give them more control. Like, imagine what it would be like to open the news and read about this like new permaculture technique that allows you to store and filter water in drought conditions. And it's really simple. Here's how to do it.
And here's a crowdfunding opportunity for those that need resources to help implement this new technology.
Yeah, right. And here's an article about this community of like people from all different cultures who came together and decided to remediate a piece of land that had toxic oil spilled on it 10 years ago. And they found this method from Paul Stamets using mushrooms that eat the oil. And here they are co-creating this awesome reality and not fighting about what color their skin is and their stupid identity politics. Like that, to me.
So you just said something very controversial.
Media.
It's so interesting.
Right?
You share one thing.
Like what you focus on expands.
Yeah.
And if the focus is only on our differences and there's this obsession with othering, whether it's based on skin, whether it's based on medical status, whether it's based on political views, what if the obsession were the opposite of othering? And it was like all the ways that we are similar and we can work together to bridge those differences and honor them. They're beautiful. Like, what are we if we don't have our differences? But when the differences are like a threat.
Right. When it becomes that you have to be silenced because of my difference or your difference, and that you need to cower in a corner and be quiet because of my difference or your difference or our differences, then it becomes extremely problematic. You and I come from very similar backgrounds. One reason we've bonded so hard. I mean, we were already bonded for life the moment we met, but then we bonded even more hardcore in the last couple of years because we came from such similar vantage points, because we both came from very left-wing liberal ideology. I mean, I had started to sort of deviate from that several years ago when my favorite singer-songwriter, Ani DeFranco, was crucified because she did something that her fans didn't like, and was accused of being racist. And she came out and she defended herself. You know, she was like, well, this is actually what I was thinking when I did this. If you guys, like, if you can just hear me out, like where my heart was. And they were like, oh, she's in denial. She's obviously deeply unconscious of her racism. Cancel, cancel, cancel. And then she was like, never mind. The whole thing is my retreat's canceled. Everything's done. I'm wrong. You're right. I'm no more talky talk. And I'm just like, okay, y'all, this was your biggest advocate. She's a huge advocate for underdogs. Huge. And you just like freaking threw her to the wolves because you saw a flaw in her plans. And instead of bringing it up to her graciously and seeing what she had to say and then empathizing with maybe where she was coming from. So at that point, that was like in 2012 or so, I started to question things a bit more. But yeah, I mean, now I certainly don't put myself on either side of any kind of binary political spectrum or lack thereof. But I find myself in all sorts of sort of very interesting perspectives. I mean, I used to be in the streets rallying for NARAL and Planned Parenthood. And now I think that, I mean, it was good. It was definitely a tool that was necessary for its time. But now I'm so not into hormonal birth control. Like hormonal birth control can fuck right off because it has so detached women from their bodies. And there are other ways for us to regulate our reproductive desires than taking something that completely detaches us from one of the most important sacred gifts that we have.
I totally agree. Yeah. And I was right there with you. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that funny? Gosh, I think that's happening more than ever now. Really, like, big-hearted people who care are seeing the effects of things like what happened to Annie DeFranco.
Yeah.
And thousands of others like her who, God forbid, they're in the public eye and they say the wrong thing. Like, that is the ultimate crime. There's no compassion whatsoever. There's no acknowledgement that this is a person that, like, do you ever think thoughts that you're like, oh, that's maybe not like PC, but there's no one, like, or say things out loud even, but there's no one around to capture your every move and just waiting with the pitchfork. Like,
right.
It's I can't imagine being a famous person.
Now, yeah. Oh my God.
Pressure to be just perfect. And I think that's why famous people, for the most part, say, like, really famous people say little of actual importance because they have to stick so closely to the party line. They can't deviate. Like even what happened to Nicki Minaj when she tweeted about her like brother's friend whose balls got swollen after he took the jab. And people were like trying to cancel her for one little comment. Like, not allowed.
Yeah. Well, I really love your picture you paint of new paradigm media
And marketing.
Yeah.
New paradigm marketing. Well, like, I think the emotional part is like being in tune with our own emotions. Our entire emotional spectrum is, to me, like, really high up their responsibility for modern marketers and entrepreneurs, knowing that the emotions that you experience are the same emotions that your customer base experiences. And if you can't speak to those emotions, then what have you got? You've got neutrality and apathy and more, I mean, maybe cynicism isn't the right word, but I would say collectively consumers are becoming more and more cynical. Like, there's huge promises everywhere we look, in every vein, and people aren't just going to take that at face value. If you can't create an emotional experience for someone and they're reading your work or watching your stuff or on your sales page, they're not going to buy anything. And more importantly, they're not going to experience the transformation that what you have to offer can give them.
So new paradigm marketing acknowledges emotionality.
Yeah. Acknowledges emotionality. And I think that, like,
I was going to say, without manipulation.
Yeah. without manipulation, and that requires a deep sense of understanding of self, because like through what other means will you understand other? That like kind of cliche concept that like business is a form of personal growth and development, a really powerful one. For me, that just continually expands in how true it feels. And I know that my business can only grow to the point that I'm willing to grow as a person.
Yeah. I think one thing that came to me while you were talking just now was just that within us, and now I'm getting spiritual with it, but within us, we contain the multitudes. We contain everything and everyone, the infinity. I mean, we each are some sort of individuated fractalization of source or God. And if we can sort of tap into the other as a reflection of something within ourselves, and if we're super resistant to that other, the first thing we need to do is look within and find that part of ourselves that is shamed or repressed about that other, because that's inside us. Every single part of what we see in the world is contained within us.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. And something you said earlier with like creating emotionality and embracing emotionality without manipulation. I want to expand on that and talk about what that means. How I understand it. And this sort of speaks to media as well as marketing, because in both there's propaganda. And I was listening to this podcast with Zach Stein is his name, and he writes for the Consilience Project. Have you listened to any podcast episodes with Daniel Schmachtenberger?
No, but I'll pull him up.
Okay, he's been on Aubrey Marx's podcast a few times, and he did it's called the Sense Making series for Rebel Wisdom, which they have a podcast and a YouTube channel. And the whole premise of the Consilience Project, how I understand it.
No, I did listen to this. I'm remembering it now.
Okay, cool.
I don't know how I didn't remember that name.
Daniel Schmachtenberger. He's super hot.
Yeah.
And he was one of the founders of Qualia, the nootropics company. I think his brother runs it now, but basically he's talking about how we can't create a new paradigm using the tools that we used to create the old paradigm that like we know is totally broken. And what we have now, the technology we have now did not exist way back when the foundations for what our current systems in education, in health, in media, like we're still using really outdated old systems, but we have totally different technology. So he's, trying to create solutions that would help us to actually move forward based on what we currently have access to. And so Zach Stein, he writes on the Consilience Project and is all about changing the education system. So something he said, and this was on the Jim Rep podcast, where he was talking about propaganda. And, currently everywhere we look, on whether it's like the conspiracy side or the mainstream media side, Like there's propaganda everywhere. And then in marketing too. But how do you tell the difference between propaganda and genuine education? Because propaganda is education in disguise. Well, they're trying to disguise it as education, but it's not. It's not, because education always has a graduation point. There's a point where you attain a certain level of knowledge equal to your teacher. And then that teacher, like often we celebrate it with ceremony in our culture. Our teacher gifts us a diploma, we get a certificate, we can move on and learn the next thing and graduate from that eventually. With propaganda, there is no graduation point. There's a power dynamic that says, I'm the teacher and you'll never know as much as me. And I hold all the knowledge and I'm not going to give it all to you. I'll give you a little bit, just enough. And you do as I say and trust my expertise and don't ask questions. And don't expect that you'll ever rise to where I am in this understanding. And I think we can see that with the FDA, for example, not releasing any of the actual data on the you-know-what, saying that they'll release it in 50 years. That's like a real thing that's happening. So that to me like is an example of propaganda. Just believe what we tell you, don't ask questions. And people might think, well, people would never be able to understand that data anyways. So what's the point? And the point is that you could have an actual education system built around helping people understand that data if they were so inclined to do so. And that's the difference. So I think it applies to marketing as well. Is your intention as someone who's, and I know you work with a lot of people who sell information, myself included, I sell information. So is my intention to only give people enough information that they'll just have to buy the next thing, and then I'll give them a little bit more information, but I'm not going to give them all the information they need because I don't actually want them to reach that graduation point and have the level of success that I have, because I always want to be in a position of power over them. And a lot of marketers, that is their intention. But most, I would say it's not. I would say most people who want to share knowledge and information do so from a place of genuine desire to educate. And that intention makes all the difference. And then there's just nuance around ethics. And some people think sharing testimonials with money numbers in them is unethical. And it's like, okay, but then you could have a conversation with another person over here and they could beautifully explain why it's not counter to their ethics. So like that part of it is up for debate and discussion, the whole ethics conversation. But I think that the bottom line of it all is like, what's your intention? Do you want to be a propagandist or do you want to be an educator?
Wow. That's awesome. I love that distinction. Thank you so much. And I feel like I've never made that distinction. I've just always, said like, I'm not a madman marketer or a bro marketer. I'm the kind of marketer that is fully transparent. Like, here's what I have, or here's what my client has, or, speaking from my client's perspective, with copywriting, like, here's what we have. Do you want it or not? Like, you know what I mean? And here's all the information that you could possibly need about it. And if you have any questions, ask, you know, and like speaking to that in an emotional way so that people like really feel moved by it and that like they know, you know, intuitively whether it's something they want or not. But yeah, but that other sort of tactic, what they call the bro marketing tactic, which is like just feeding a little bit, then you buy this, and then we'll feed you a little bit more, and then you buy this, and here's a tripwire, which by the way, tripwire is the worst freaking thing to call something. Like you wanted to fuck off. I don't want to be tripped. I want you to talk to me like a real human. And if there's another thing I should buy to go along with this because it'll be better, just let me know. Don't try to trip me.
The language is so weird.
I call it a low-cost loving offering.
I love that. That's so much better.
I know. I'm
trying to find a new word for content. I really dislike the word content. I think there's too many things that could qualify as content, and then there's no nuance around like good content versus just like surface level blah content versus like, you know, there's just,
you might have to make up a new word.
I know. Maybe you can help me with that. Anyone listening, if you have ideas for what else to call it, please hit me up.
Talk to me about, I mean, we're getting close to our hour, but talk to me about how you think we can inspire the mainstream to live in a new way, to live more in harmony with like nature and natural law and you know, something regenerative that won't destroy ourselves and the planet. How can we speak to the mainstream about that?
Yeah, you know, I think beyond speaking, it starts with our energy. And like maybe here in Canada, people would label me as like an alt-right crazy person supporting these truckers. How dare they shut down commerce for a few days? And they'll have this idea of what that type of person looks like in their head. Then if I show up in their lives and my energy is just like open and warm and kind and positive compared to the energy of, the opposite of that, which I would say is more common because people are so fucking tired and like don't have any time to take care of their nervous systems. Most people are operating in like this intense state of stress,
survival mode,
constant anxiety, survival mode to the extreme. So to show someone with your energy that there's an alternative way of being and feeling, not from a place of like, oh, I'm special, or from a place of like, well, it's because I have all these privileges you don't have. Like, no, let's take all of that out of the equation and just look at energy. And we had my grandma's celebration of life on the weekend, and it was just so beautiful to reflect on who she was. Like, she was such a hard worker, and you know, she really struggled with English. English was her second language, and she moved to English speaking province and had to figure it out and, you know, work two jobs to make ends meet. And yet her energy, the way that she showed up was just so positive. And she was always, you know, just celebrating something. And that's how I want to be. Because I think that's more powerful than even the most compelling string of words to try and convince someone on a conscious level. Like, if we stay in Canada, what I want to do here is build up a space, a communal space where anyone is welcome to come and like share in yoga practice or have a dance party or just like learn something, and maybe someone who's, you know, loves the old paradigm and they love cancel culture and they just like they roll with all the identities that
who identifies that way. I love the paradigm and cancel culture and identity politics. It's the best.
Clearly a lot of
people.
Right? Because it's been presented as a solution and a path toward progress. Just shows you like how powerful propaganda and words and ideas are.
Oh my God, it had me in a vice grip.
Right? But if that person showed up and all these people who, you know, disagree with them on lots of things on a conscious level just had an energy of like openness, acceptance, joy, I think that's where the real seed that would allow for change could be planted. But that's like hyper local. Of course, there's got to be ways of doing that on a bigger scale, and maybe it's far-fetched, but maybe your energy can also be felt through your marketing, through what you're putting out there on Instagram, through your emails. Like, I think it can. I think there's a lot that exists underneath the words that we use to explain things. So,
well, amazing that on that note, said from the words of, or from the mouth of the most brilliant copywriter I know. Chanti, how can people find you?
You can find me at shantizak.com. I am on the socials at Chanti Zak. I have a podcast, The Entrepreneur's Ecosystem, that's on Spotify and iTunes.
And that's Chanti, CHANTIZAK. And do you have anything you would like to tell people about? Any upcoming events or offerings or anything?
Oh, when's this episode gonna come out? Are you
pretty darn soon? I'm just like flying by the seat of my pants.
I love it. In a few months, I'm gonna open the doors to a new like group coaching experience on all about how to create an empathy marketing ecosystem in your business. So that'll be fun. Watch out for that. And other cool stuff. I mean, I got some quizzes. If you're curious about maybe creating a quiz in your own business, go to shantizak.com/quiz and find out which one might be a good fit for you. And what else? Sarah, you know. No, I'm just kidding.
Quizzes are because they segment your audience into different groups so that you know exactly how to market to those particular audiences. Like, quizzes are genius. And so definitely go to shantizak.com/quiz and check that out.
There you go. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And I hope you're having a beautiful day. Sending you all lots of love. Thank you, Chanti. I love you.
Love you.